Welcome to today's Explainer. So, on May 20th, 2026, something huge happened in India's environmental regulatory space. The Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, we'll just call them the MOEFCC, issued draft notification SO 2593E. Now, I know that sounds like a mouthful of legal jargon, but this document dramatically changes the rules for building the country's massive port infrastructure. It fundamentally alters the timeline developers have to actually complete these multi-phase megaprojects. If you're at all interested in infrastructure, environmental law, or just the mechanics of how a country grows its economy, this is absolutely a policy shift you need to know about.
Our roadmap for today is pretty straightforward. We'll cover environmental clearance basics, the infrastructure bottleneck, a real-world case study on the Vision Jam Seaport, the proposed 20-year solution, its newfound parity with nuclear power, and finally, what this all means for India's economic growth.
All right, Section 1. Environmental Clearance, Understanding the Baseline.
To really grasp why this new draft is such a game changer, we first need to look at the foundation. What actually is an environmental clearance, or EC? Basically, it's an official green light from the MOEFCC or SEIA. It confirms that a proposed project has been rigorously checked for its environmental impact and it's allowed to proceed, but with conditions. And it's highly specific. It's granted only for a particular project at a specific site. So if you suddenly decide to change your technology, your capacity, or your location, yep, you need a completely fresh clearance. It acts as a vital shield for our natural resources, while setting very clear boundaries for corporate compliance.
But here's the catch. Not all projects are treated equally under the current rules. For instance, mining projects enjoy an EC validity of up to 30 years. Nuclear power projects get 15 years. But massive ports and harbors, they're currently capped at just 10 years. It's a glaring inequality in how different heavy industries are handled, and it totally sets the stage for the massive regulatory friction we're about to dive into.
Moving to Section 2, the infrastructure bottleneck, the reality of building ports.
Building a port isn't like building a house. It's a massive, multi-phase endeavor that rarely, if ever, sticks to a simple schedule. Which brings us to a really obvious question. Why is 10 years simply not enough time? I mean, a decade sounds like a lifetime to get a project off the ground, right? Yet it consistently falls short for maritime infrastructure developers. Why do they keep running out of the clock?
Well, the Sectoral Expert Appraisal Committee looked into exactly this, and they identified several factors that are honestly entirely beyond a developer's control. We're talking about unavoidably long gestation periods and necessarily phased development strategies. Plus, developers face severe land acquisition issues, relentless legal disputes, sudden funding gaps whenever the macroeconomic climate shifts, and completely unforeseen technical challenges. All these rigid 10-year timelines do is create severe regulatory bottlenecks. When that 10-year clock runs out, critical projects are literally forced to stall out, and developers have to reapply for clearances practically from scratch.
Section 3. Case Study, Vision Jam Seaport, a real-world administrative nightmare.
To make this abstract regulatory bottleneck idea super concrete, let's look at a real-world example, the Vision Jam International Deepwater Multipurpose Seaport down in Kerala. Looking at the official MOEFCC document for Phase 2 and 3, you immediately see the sheer mind-boggling scale of this project. We're looking at an estimated capital cost of 9,540 crore rupees, requiring approximately 14.8 million cubic meters of dredging. That is enough to fill a ridiculous number of stadiums. This is definitely not something you just build overnight.
And because of that unbelievable scale, their administrative burden has been immense. They secured their initial Phase 1 clearance way back in January 2014. Because the limit was so short, they had to go back to the government for an extension in December 2020. Then they got a special COVID waiver period granted in January 2021. And then, you guessed it, they had to go back yet again in December 2024 for an additional one-year extension. This step-by-step timeline perfectly highlights exactly why developers are forced to constantly seek bureaucratic fixes just to keep the lights on and the dredging machines running.
All right, Section 4, the proposed 20-year solution, breaking down draft notification SO 2593E.
That administrative nightmare perfectly illustrates why the MOEFCC issued this new draft notification, specifically targeting projects under Item 7F, like ports, harbors, breakwaters, and dredging. And the whole solution really boils down to one magic number, 20. The draft proposes a new maximum total validity period of 20 years for environmental clearances in this sector.
Let's do the math on how this actually changes the landscape. Under the old rule, developers got 10 years of initial validity, plus a maximum extension of just 1 year, totaling 11 years. But under the new proposed draft rule, they get an initial validity of 15 years, plus a potential 5-year maximum extension. That brings the total to 20 years. It nearly doubles the timeline. This finally gives developers of these massive multi-phase projects the continuous breathing room they desperately need to handle inevitable delays without losing their legal footing.
Section 5. Parity with nuclear power. Elevating maritime infrastructure.
There's actually a fascinating little detail hidden right in the legal text of the draft amendment regarding paragraph 9 of the EIA 2006. It amends the paragraph by inserting ports and harbors into specific subparagraphs. But what's really crucial here is that it legally places ports right next to nuclear power projects and processing of nuclear fuel. The expert committees officially validated this move by equating the massive gestation periods of maritime infrastructure with those of nuclear plants. Essentially, this elevates ports to the absolute highest tier of easy validity.
Finally, Section 6. Impact on India's growth, the ease of doing business.
So why does the government actually care so much about fixing this? Well, experts and officials alike emphasize that the primary goal is to greatly enhance the ease of doing business. Removing that constant looming threat of an arbitrary administrative expiration provides incredible regulatory certainty for developers and investors. It dramatically reduces the repetitive administrative and financial burdens on both the state and the builders. Ultimately, it protects these critical maritime projects from just stalling out, making the entire infrastructure development process far more flexible and continuous.
There's a fantastic analysis by India Law LLP that captures this perfectly. They wrote, "The amendment will strike an appropriate equilibrium between environmental diligence and developmental necessity." I think that hits the nail on the head. It highlights the ultimate goal of the draft, balancing strict, absolutely necessary environmental protection with the undeniable need to build out national infrastructure. Which leaves us with a pretty provocative question to consider. If ports now get 20 years to match nuclear power, which massive infrastructure sector is going to demand regulatory rationalization next? This draft notification is currently open for a 60-day public feedback window, and it represents a massive shift in how we balance time, nature, and economic growth. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll see you next time.